that sometimes you may know about PTSD, you may think you understand it, and yet not realize that that's what's causing you to have particular behaviors or feelings until it's identified for you. But I think our healthcare workers especially are going to be experiencing PTSD over time based on what they've seen, what they've been kind of required to endure in terms of working with COVID patients. I think it's certainly the case that most of our healthcare workers are truly invested in their patients, and it's very difficult for them to deal with all of the severity of the disease and the loss of life that they've witnessed. So yeah, I would say that's a definite.
We have a question from Maria.
Okay.
Are there any resources you can provide for vehicle modifications or to assist with vehicle repairs, especially if the vehicle is too old for repair and there is no budget to purchase a new vehicle?
Yes, I'm going to say that kind of a little bit of a limited way there. We can provide information about vehicle modification for a number of types of disabilities, especially for someone who has quadriplegia. That would be one area certainly where vehicle modification is needed. Again, most of these are for workplace accommodations, and it may be that the employer might be required to provide those accommodations, not just if it's somebody who needs to travel to work, but if the vehicle is needed for work, being able to provide that might be a possibility, or it might be possible to get that through vocational rehabilitation. But we can certainly provide information on how that's done. Vehicle maintenance and repairs, that's a little different. That's not something that I would say we typically are involved with. But I certainly understand the difficulties that can arise from, a vehicle maybe being a bit out of date and not being up to using all the most recently available technology.
Oh, those are all our questions for now.
Okay, great. Move on. So now let's take a look at how JAN actually functions, how the interactions take place. The first thing is you contact us. And as I said, there are a number of ways to go about doing that. You can call us on our 800 line. We have both voice and TTY capabilities, and I've listed the numbers here. I will say that because of the pandemic and because we are still working from home, most of us, it's a little different, because it used to be that when you called on our 800 line, you always got a live person who answered that phone call. Right now, the way we're doing it is you have to leave us a voice message. We have employees who spend their days basically taking those voice messages off, and they will then relay the information out to the appropriate consultant who will give you a call back. You can go to the JAN website at askjan.org, and there you can submit what's called a JAN on-demand request form, or you can open a live chat. So again, we have lots of different ways that you can get in touch with us. And no matter which of the methods you choose to use, you'll be connected with our professional staff who can best answer your accommodation information questions. And as I said previously, our staff work in teams specializing in different types of disabilities. So to determine your specific needs, we'll talk to you to obtain all the necessary information. We'll take as long as it takes with you, talking on the phone or chatting, however you want to contact us. And we'll do that. We won't use techie talk or jargon or lingo, but we'll provide you with information on practical accommodation solutions using a really comprehensive approach to fully address all of your concerns. I know there are times when our folks will be on the phone with somebody for an hour or maybe even a little longer, trying to just make sure they get all the information that's needed. Once our consultant fully understands the situation, then they go to work. They're the ones who will do all the searching to determine the most appropriate information to meet your needs. We'll research the latest technology that's available. We'll review potential accommodation solutions. We'll explore a variety of approaches that may be needed to fully address your needs. And we'll include the most current legislative information that's available, because that's also changing all the time. New decisions are made, or again, new disabilities may be added in. As we go through the pandemic, we may be looking at modifications to how interpretations are made a little bit to further define what types of COVID-related limitations may be included or not included. And once we have figured out what would be potential solutions for you, we'll discuss the options with you and provide you with all the supporting information that you'll need to make the best accommodation decision. This might include information on specific products and the vendors from which those products are available. It might be contact information for organizations and agencies that might be able to assist you. It might be relevant legislative information that could potentially impact your decision, and information on any other available resources that we think might be helpful to you. Any questions at this point?
We do not have any questions at this point.
Okay, I'll move on to step 5. Then you'll receive the information, your customized information. We'll send that information to you by email if you choose to give us your email address, or we can send it by ground mail if you opt to give us your name and your mailing address. And I'll also point out, you can choose to remain anonymous if you want. Just use the information as we present it to you on the phone. It's entirely your choice. You decide how you're comfortable in receiving the information and how much information you want to tell us about yourself. And then once you've received the information, you decide what works best for your situation. You might need to discuss this with an employer, with an employee, with a manager or a supervisor. You get to determine what works best for both the business and the individual. And then once the decision is made, you implement the accommodation. And hopefully it all works out for everyone. But if not, we're always still here to help with additional information. Maybe a person's condition worsens over time, or new symptoms or limitations develop. Maybe there are changes within the workplace, such as new equipment being put in place that impacts the previously made accommodation, or maybe something like a new supervisor comes on board and that results in difficulties. Maybe the first accommodation choice just didn't work out for some reason. Contact us again. We'll keep working with you until we help you reach a positive outcome. That's what we want to have happen. Any questions?
We do have a question, and
Okay.
The question is, Jan must have an amazing amount of data. Does Jan track requests or trends, and are there opportunities for researchers to work with Jan to access de-identified data and explore questions that may be relevant to Jan's excellent work?
We do have quite a lot of data. We do maintain information regarding the types of accommodation requests that are made. And we have written a number of articles that address this, not as many as I'd like. We haven't had really good opportunities to work with other researchers and be able to share that, but I certainly will say keep a watch, kind of on this space, if you will, because as I said, we're working right now to go back through looking at data trends. I'm doing a really deep dive into the disability trends that we're seeing, looking to see if we can predict what are the needs going to be moving forward, because that'll put us in a better situation to be able to be prepared and answer the questions that are coming in. So, I'm always looking toward making that information available, sharing it in terms of aggregate data. We do have to be very, very, very careful. We know we don't want to be putting anything out that puts anybody's privacy at risk in any way. So we're very, very careful about not sharing information. As I said earlier, this is completely confidential, and we maintain that to an extremely strict level. But thank you for that question. Any others?
This question comes from Deborah. Does Jan have resources or connections regarding up-to-date labor market surveys for rehabilitation counselors looking to explore hiring trends for their clients with disabilities?
Oh, that's a good question. I would have to talk to some of my colleagues and see what we would have available on that. But Deborah, you can get in touch with me after the webcast. That would be something I'd really be interested in looking at. Good point. Thank you. Anything else?
Jessica said, such a good question. And we also have a question in the Q&A box, and the question is, at what point during the employment process do you recommend talking to a potential employer about accommodations?
That's going to depend on a number of factors, including the disability. And that's something that our consultants can talk to individuals with on a one-to-one basis, kind of help them determine when's going to be a good time, what other factors maybe need to be taken into consideration with a particular employer. It can be just kind of in that interviewing process to kind of get a feel for how receptive maybe the particular interviewer is going to be, or is it something you should hold off on a little bit? But yeah, our consultants can work with you on a case-by-case basis to determine, again, when might be the most appropriate time, what you might be better off revealing early versus later. Also, again, what your rights are under the Americans with Disabilities Act and other legislation, what your responsibilities are. When they come back and ask for medical documentation, what do you need to do? What do you need to provide to them? So, that's, and it's different really for different disabilities. There are some employers who are very, very knowledgeable across a broad range of disabilities, and then there are other situations where maybe they're not so aware of particular disabilities and how those are impactful on an individual, what limitations might result.
We have a question from Joshua.
Okay.
In my state, there are many factories developing pilot programs for individuals with autism. Would Jan be able to work with these factories to find suitable accommodations for these types of programs?
Absolutely, yes. We've already been working with a few, looking at what are kind of best practices. And I always kind of hate that phrase. I don't know why. I know it's very popular, what are the best practices that are being used by other employers that, you know, as you say, companies that are just starting to look in this kind of area for individuals to work in their business. But really, you know, it does depend on the employer, the type of positions they need to fill, what the work environment is going to be like in terms of how to make accommodations for individuals. And certainly someone who has a disability along the autism spectrum, there's a very, very broad range there. And what accommodations a person's going to need is going to depend entirely on the level of severity, their own particular skills or abilities or limitations or difficulties that they encounter. But yeah, definitely we can work with employers, we can work with the individual, we can work with vocational rehabilitation professionals who are trying to place individuals into those settings.
This question is from Lynn, and the question is, are the folks working with Jan using Zoom to work with individuals to answer questions? Could the individual ask to have a rehab counselor in the meeting?
Yes, we are. We just, and I mean within like the past week or so, have gotten video conferencing now, which is safe and secure for everybody. If you want, you can request video conferencing with our consultants, and that does allow to have the individual and the rehabilitation counselor, or maybe an interpreter, you know, whoever needs to be involved in this conversation, can all work together. And especially during the pandemic, we don't want people being in the same room at the same time. So it was one of the big reasons why we moved toward putting this in place, but we've got it all set up now. All of our consultants are ready to move forward with using video conferencing to help you.
Those are all our questions for now.
Okay, great. Thank you, everybody, because those are, Phil was right. Phil gave me a heads up before the meeting. He said, people are going to ask really good questions, and he's right. People are asking really, really good questions. Okay, so let's take a look here at what is the end game. What are we hoping for? What outcomes do we want to realize with this? Well, businesses want to hire qualified employees who become valued members of their workforce. They want to be able to return valued employees to work following an injury or an illness. They want to be able to meet customer demands for their goods and their services by having well-prepared and engaged employees. And rehabilitation professionals want to be able to place clients into meaningful and sustainable employment settings where their skills and education will lead to continuing career opportunities. Jan can help achieve all of these goals. And businesses need to keep the bottom line in mind. They need to do this without incurring huge costs. Jan can help with that as well. And I don't want you to take my word on this. Take the word of more than 3,000 employers who have reported their results after contacting Jan for information. We do a follow-up survey in which we go back to employers and say, tell us about your experience after using Jan, the information that we provided. How well did that work out for you? And so of these more than 3,000 employers, 56% said the accommodation they implemented cost them nothing, not a dollar. Now, there may have been somebody else that paid for that. It may have been an insurance company. It may have been vocational rehabilitation, but the employer did not have any cost. For those that did have a cost, the typical accommodation cost $500. I mean, that's so little. to be able to either employ a person or bring a person back following an injury or an illness. And again, I'm going to say, just as a reminder, this is after having talked to a Jan consultant. I'm not going to say that any of these numbers pertain to making accommodations without having talked to us first. But additionally here, 58% of the employers said they eliminated costs that would have been associated if they'd had to train a new employee into that position. And that holds true even if it's somebody who's already working for the company, but would have to be brought into that position and trained to do that job. And 30% said they saved workers' compensation or other insurance costs. To me, those are truly impactful for a company. And also, we know that lower costs aren't the only goal. Businesses need to be concerned with productivity. The higher the productivity, the better off the company is going to be. Based on the same survey, 68% of the employers told us the accommodations they implemented increased their employees' productivity. That's huge. 57% said they increased the employees' attendance. And certainly what we know is the more the person is on the job, the better their productivity is going to be. And 90% said they were able to retain a valued employee because they made the accommodations. And I will point out here, if you think about those numbers and you say, well, that adds up to way over 100%. Well, employers were allowed to indicate multiple benefits resulting from a single accommodation. So that kind of explains that. And even more benefits. 55% felt the overall morale of their employees had improved because they made the accommodations. Why is that? Well, workers saw that the company cared for the well-being of their employees. And so it just increased everybody's positive feelings about the company. 49% said overall company productivity improved. Now that can be a real case when an employer puts an accommodation into effect for one person, realizes that it had a very positive impact, and it's, well, let's do that for everybody then. So that can have a major impact on increasing productivity company-wide. 46% of the employers said they had increased safety, which is always a very serious concern. And 20% said that their profitability was increased. I can't think of a company that would not want to have this kind of benefit just from making an accommodation for one or more workers within their workplace. Any questions at this point?
We do not have any questions at this point.
Okay. All right. So a minute ago, I went through all those steps using Jan and how it works, how we can work with you directly. Well, there is one other alternative that I didn't mention. You can always choose to do your own search using our askjan.org website. Vendor and product information, organizations, and other available resources, materials that specifically address a multitude of disabling conditions. It's all there for you to use anytime you want. So, I encourage folks to use the website, do your own searches. We also have, well, I won't say that one just yet. I'll hold off onto this for one more second here. Materials that you will find there are arranged in a variety of ways. They're arranged by disability. They're arranged by audience type. So whether the person using it is an employer, a person with a disability, or a rehabilitation professional, we've grouped the information together for those specific target audiences, and just alphabetically, if that's how you prefer to do your searching. And you'll also find our searchable online accommodations resource, or SOAR for short. And again, the brand new My Jan feature, don't forget that. Set up your account and store information into it that you think you would like to use from time to time. All right, so that's pretty much all I have. Jan, you have the questions. Jan has the answers. We'll really work to help businesses get through the tough times and thrive through the good times. That's what we're here to do.
We have a question from Lynn.
Okay.
The question is, I might have missed it, but do you all do individual vocational assessments to determine qualifications for some job fields?
Very limited. I'll say it's not meeting really one-on-one and going through what I would consider, a real thorough evaluation, but it's as part of the accommodation process. We'll talk about what the particular limitations are, and I've used that phrase kind of throughout my presentation here. Limitations, I always describe those as any word you can think of that ends in ing. So walking, lifting, talking, reading, we'll go through a pretty extensive look at the different types of limitations that might result from a particular disability. If you take something like multiple sclerosis, that can impact an individual in many different ways. And certainly not everybody has the same limitations that result, at least not at the same time. And so, we can look at what are the particular limitations that are important at this moment, and look at accommodations that are going to be applicable now. We can also, during that discussion, talk about what might be occurring later on as the condition progresses, or as new limitations may evolve over time. So, that's not what I would consider to be a real vocational evaluation, but it certainly is looking at potential approaches toward accommodating a person in a workplace, and how the limitations can be addressed most effectively.
We do not have any questions posed right now. Do you have any stories that are particularly powerful over the years that you've come across working with a Jan consultant?
Oh boy, I do. That's it. Well, if I start to cry during this, it's your fault. We had an individual who worked with us for quite a number of years, who was truly, truly an outstanding consultant, has since retired. But we had a call that had come in kind of late in the day, and I was in this individual's office, so this is how I came to know about this. But the call came in, and we call them program assistants. They're the people that are kind of the front line. They take the calls first, and then triage, figure out which specialty team is most appropriate to answer a particular question or work with a caller. And so the program assistant actually walked back into this employee's office and said, I have a caller on the phone who's really, really upset. I can't get them to tell me even really exactly what the disability is. They just keep asking me, do I have a disability? Because nobody's going to understand them that doesn't have a disability. And so as I say, this employee was particularly skilled at dealing with difficult situations. So he said, I'll talk to them. It's okay. Just send the call back and I'll talk with them. And I started to get up and leave, and he kind of motioned for me, just sit down and wait. So, the call came through to his desk, and, he kind of worked a little bit to get the person calmed down. And the person was speaking so loudly that I could actually hear it. I mean, he had a headset on, but I could hear the conversation. And, the person finally conveyed to him that they had been in an accident and had lost their right arm. And it was their dominant arm. And the vocational rehabilitation agent counselor that they were working with wanted them to go back to their previous job. And the job required them to type and to take messages. And they just did not see how that was ever going to be possible. And the counselor, obviously, they said, didn't have a disability, didn't understand what they needed, didn't understand what they were going through. And so, our employee finally kind of got them calmed down a little bit and being able to describe the situation. And so, he started saying, well, there are accommodations that could be put in place for you that would allow you to do this. And the person got upset again and said, obviously he didn't understand their situation either, and kept repeatedly asking, do you have a disability? Do you have a disability? And so the employee put the person on mute, and he turned and he looked at me and he said, DJ, what do I do? And I said, you know the phrase, the truth will set you free. And he said, yeah. So he unmuted and he said, yes, I do have a disability. And the person said, well, what is it? What is your disability? What is your problem? And he took a big, deep breath in and he said, I was born without arms. And there was just dead silence. And the person said, wait a minute. I've heard you typing while I've been talking to you on the phone. And he said, yes, you have. I type with my feet. He said, I use a headset so that I can do that. And again, there was silence for a little bit. And then the person said, here I've been on the phone with you complaining that I don't have an arm and you don't have any. Tell me how to go back to work. And he did. He spent like the next 45 minutes on the phone with that person and gave them all the information they needed about one-handed keyboards and where to get training and so forth. And that was it. That person could have been routed out to any one of a dozen other people in our office, and it never would have worked. But just by chance, got sent to him. And it made all the difference in the world.
Thank you, DJ, for sharing that story. We do have a question.
Okay.
And this question is from Bridget. I have a consumer starting a new job out of state next month. We are trying to complete a rehab tech evaluation to get her set up, but I think she may need ongoing supports with securing accommodations and technology. Is it possible for Jan to help her set up her workstation if OVR purchases the equipment?
We can't go to a work site and set up. Everything we do is over the phone, talking with folks, providing them with the information. But certainly we can talk about where they can get local support for doing that. We can work with you or the consumer long-term in looking for new accommodations that may become necessary or helpful. So those would be a couple of different ways that I know if we can help.
And Jennifer said, wow, that story brought tears to my eyes.
It does me too. And I mean, it was years ago, but every time, I mean, that one just really hits me. I mean, there have been a lot of others that we've had. We used to work with folks in Canada as well. We don't do that anymore, but we had an employee who was on vacation in Canada, was on a bus, got on the bus and said, you know, he was going to a particular museum, and could the bus driver please let him know when to get off the bus to get to that museum? And the bus driver said, sure, just take the seat right behind me and I'll let you know the correct stop when we get there. And so they started chatting, and the bus driver said, where are you from? And our employee said, well, I'm from Morgantown, West Virginia. And the bus driver said, oh, I know about Morgantown, West Virginia. He said, there's a place down there. It's called the Job Accommodation Network. And our employee was just shocked. He said, I work for Jan. And the guy's like, no, you're kidding. He said, I had to use Jan not long ago. He said, I was off work for months because my back got so bad. And he said, the vibrations from driving his bus just were killing me. So I couldn't do it anymore. My doctor told me I couldn't come back to work like that. And he said, my rehab counselor called Jan. He said, I was there with him on the call. He said, they told us about a seat that would absorb the vibration. And he said, so I went to my employer and they said, we'll get it for you. So they purchased the seat, had it installed in his bus. He said, I got in, I drive around town. He said, the vibrations don't bother my back anymore. He said, I'm back to work full time. He said, that place is great. You know, we were just laughing afterwards. It's like, what are the odds? You know, you get on a bus with this guy that, you know, he's used your services. It's a small world sometimes.
It is. It is. Marissa said, thank you for that initial story. I appreciated that. What you said. We do not have any questions currently.
Okay.
I have put out a question in the chat box asking if anyone has a question to please ask it in the Q&A box. So if
there's anything that you know, you folks think that you would like to know a little bit more about, I tell you what, let me do this. I've got a link here to our website. Let me go to this and I'll show you. Now, can you folks see that website? That sharing with you?
We cannot. You're still sharing your PowerPoint at this point.
Okay, let me stop the share.
Yeah.